Three, two, one, and we are recording. We're live and we're on. This is SHB Unfiltered, your podcast, your daily podcast for the day. My name is Ruben Pillai, and I'm here with Christopher Jackson, aka CJ, and this is a number one podcast in town at 6:15 p.m. every single day, hosted by people who stutter, talking about stuttering, things about it, things around it, and a few other fun topics as well sometimes. Today, we are currently at what episode, Chris?
Episode 53.
Episode 53, which means we have been running for 53 consecutive days since the start of lockdown. And since then, all we've learned is stay at home and stay alert. Is that right, Chris? How alert have you been today?
Stay alert. Control the virus. So I've been trying to stay alert today. I've been doing my best to control the virus. And it is the one thing that we have to try and avoid.
It is a madness, though, isn't it? No one knows what to do, especially those telling us what to do. It's confusing. Do you know what? If it's confusing for us, it must be really confusing for, I guess, other people in the country who maybe have a language barrier, because that speech the other day was just gibberish at times. He was just repeating things, but using bigger and bigger words, bigger words, and just waving hands and showing graphs, and that R equation is still in the back of my mind at times, thinking, when will the R go down? When will it go down? I want some Nando's now as well.
Yeah, man. He had to pull out the Nando's card to rub it in.
Got a fun comment from James saying, if you see it coming down the street, make sure you're alert and dive out of the way. See, James, listen to James, dive out of the way, even if it's into incoming traffic, take your chances, because the virus will get you if you don't.
Ruben, have you seen that video that everyone's putting around of a guy? He's driving in his van and he's just driving along and he goes, whoa, whoa, whoa. Oh, thought it was Corona. Oh, thank God it weren't Corona. Like, just completely just taking the piss, man. Everyone's at it. I don't know if you've seen the Matt Lucas one as well.
Yes, I have actually, yes. Yeah.
He killed Boris in his one, and the Paul Chowdhury one we were talking about earlier that had me in stitches.
Jokes aside, they have gone a bit, well, they do talk about kind of casualties and infections and death and stuff, but they haven't been as fear-mongering as they've been since the first few weeks. Have people just become immune to it now? Is it normal for people to go? But are people doubting the statistics? Because there's a lot of news out there kind of leaning towards the fact that these stats aren't correct. I know, have you seen the JRE episode yet with Elon Musk, Joe Rogan?
No.
So one of the things that's happening in the States is for people passing away. So say hypothetically someone died of a heart attack, so that they died from a heart attack, but if they had coronavirus, they could have been asymptomatic or not, they would chalk that down in the coronavirus stats. So then they would add on to those stats. And there's quite a lot of cases like that as well, where people are dying from different causes, but they happen to have the virus in their system. So it ticks that box. So it isn't entirely clear what the numbers are. And I know here they weren't even including care home statistics as well. So there was a doubt at one point that the stats were under, but they could be over now. And in a few weeks' time, it could be all different again. It's very, very confusing times for us.
It is confusing, but what's more confusing is that the rate of infection is still high, even after all this lockdown. It's still high, which proves that people haven't really been locked down. It hasn't really been a proper lockdown at all. So to me, from what I can see and what I've witnessed outside in the streets, is that people are now just allowed to live how they were living for the past 7 weeks. So for me, I don't feel like a lot's changed in people's attitude. I still saw a lot of people walking around, driving on the roads, so it is just really, really confusing. Like, I was driving home from the office today, and on the A406, it was like a normal day. There was cars, there was traffic, it was stop start a little bit, which I didn't expect. So I don't know how seriously people were taking it, man.
It's a strange one, but we do know that it's affecting businesses, especially small businesses, schools, parents who have to watch their kids and work from home, income for people who can't work and who need to be at work, etc. So there's a lot going on, but I do think that we are kind of past maybe the worst of it. So things are only going to get better. And it's just, we need to be patient, isn't it? Because that's a problem if you're stuck in your house and if you don't have anything to do, you get frustrated, you get impatient, you want to go out, see friends or family, and just in the surroundings, especially if you live by yourself or if you live with a lot of people in your house. Unfortunately, we got the podcast to keep us going. And we got lovely families and stuff like that as well. But the podcast is the one, Chris. I hope they're not listening.
Yeah, let's hope not. As long as we got the podcast, Ruben, we'll be all right for the next 3 weeks anyway.
Cool, Chris. Thank you very much. Now, back to the podcast, actually. And today's topic, which is conveniently titled Ups and Downs, but could go on to other things, is I guess a topic I specifically chose because something I said to you and Ayo this morning. So just a bit of background. I was a guest on a lovely podcast, I think last week, and it was a great experience. A bit of background about the podcast. So my ethnic origin is Tamil. So we're from a region in the north of Sri Lanka, quite small, not that many people here within that community. And this podcast was started recently by someone who's promoting good work done by young people within the community. And they happened to ask me, do you want to be on? I said, okay, cool, let's do it. And it was really good. I got to talk about personal experiences, talk about charity, talk about stuttering and what affects it, and different taboos and stigmas and all that kind of stuff. But listening back, actually, this is probably it was quite strange, actually, hearing myself block a lot, because yes, I've blocked many times in the past and over the years, etc. But this was probably the first time recently that I've heard kind of the blocking. And I knew at the time, like I think I went in there and I thought, yeah, it's gonna be fine. I'm gonna be my podcast self, because Chris and I have been doing this podcast every single day for 53 days. So I thought this will be a breeze, but it's not how Stammering works, is it, Chris? Not how Stammering works.
It definitely isn't. Unfortunately for us, that's not how it works. Just because you get success in one area, it doesn't always transpire into others. Definitely.
And when I was like trying to analyze this, so this podcast was last weekend. So when I was analyzing the speech that like people who know me and stuff, they know that I'm super positive and kind of a go-getter, etc., and just really run through the wall for things. But I do analyze a lot and I break things down and see where I can improve. And that goes for like every different thing, whether it's martial arts or cooking or even making like a paper airplane. Is just you do laugh, Chris, but I do think like that. So I was thinking like, okay, so what factors were different to that and SHB Unfiltered? Now, on a basic level, SHB Unfiltered is ours, so it's kind of something that you own and you feel you got full control of. So it's easier to maybe kind of speak freely, and because you have full control, that plays into your speech as well, because that's part of it, right? Trying to keep stuttering in control. On that one, I was a guest, so I was kind of put on the spot by questions, even though I knew what was coming up. You don't have full control of the spontaneity on the podcast. Other thing that was interesting, which hit me later on, was stuttering for me personally in my family life. It was more profound, more fear and stuff when I was speaking to people from my own community, because you know them a lot better, and the way people think and the way people kind of act and talk and stuff. We know in our minds that like our uncles or parents, friends, and friends of friends are probably more judgmental and all this kind of thing. So if I speak to other Tamil people, especially older people, I tend to actually have a lot more blocks, and I think that's kind of something that's been built in me from childhood, that I'm trying to shake off, obviously, because you shouldn't really feel like that. And when I was speaking to my wife this morning, and I said, "Oh, like, have you had a chance to hear back the recording and stuff?" And I mentioned, "Yeah, you know what? Like, it's quite strange. This was, yeah, I block and freeze, but this was the most it's been for some time." And then she said, "Well, why do you think that is?" I said, "Yeah, well, I was a guest, and also it was, you know, Tamil person interviewing and Tamil audience." And then she just said, "You don't have to beat around the bush. Just say that you were probably scared of like what people will think if they heard you stutter, because you say you run this charity, or you are directing this charity and you do all this work and you coach and stuff, but yet you still stutter." And she just said, "Look, just say you're scared, it's fine, and then move on, don't beat around the bush." And I was like, cool, thank you very much. So that's what I needed, actually, because yeah, it's good to actually get that wake up call from time to time, because and you know what, like, it wasn't a bad experience at all. I had a great time on there, but I think when you look at it objectively afterwards, and you start to overanalyze, right, Chris? So yeah, that was the story. I'm gonna be quiet for a bit and let Chris analyze me now.
Well, to be honest, I want to ask you a couple of questions about it, because I listened to the podcast today and it was a cool podcast. The topics were topics that I've not asked you about. I've never spoken to you about before. There was subjects about how you met Ranja, what happened when you first met her parents, what it's like to have a stutter in the Tamil community. And the question that I want to ask you is, was it only that the fear was that people from your community were going to listen to it? Or was it also the fact that during that podcast, you were having to relive these potentially difficult times and it was bringing back all these emotions that you were getting rid of as you were growing as a person, and all the personal development work that you do, you're trying to let go. And she was basically trying to bring them all out of you to see what it was like to live with that struggle in your community.
You know what? That's a really good point, actually, really interesting. Because when I kind of tell stories, I try to actually be in the story as well in my mind. And that was something I didn't really pick out actually when I was thinking back, because yes, like back at that time, so much fear, man. Like speaking to people, wondering, think I don't want to embarrass my parents, don't want to embarrass my family, and just kind of like thinking back, you might have a point there, because I think when I was growing up, because you're kind of with your parents a lot, you spend quite a lot of time at the temple, which was essentially like a community center for everyone to gather and stuff and meet and chat. And we used to go there like 3 times a week when I was growing up, and purely just to for them to see their friends and everything, and my grandparents to see their friends. Trust me, like praying was like 10 minutes, and you spend 3 hours just there, just chilling and eating food. So spent a lot of time there in my formative years, which meant that you kind of maybe become socially conditioned to perceiving all these things, and there is real kind of stigma against mental health and all this kind of stuff. People don't talk about it, or some of the terminology that they use is pretty backward, say hypothetically, if someone has a learning difficulty, then the only word like some people know for it is dumb. Like, that's literally what they'll say.
I understand what you're
saying. And then you can't really differentiate between different learning difficulties. So if I come along and if I can't string a sentence together, then I'll probably be dumb as well. So that was really interesting, actually. So actually talking about some of these things in the past, maybe they brought up those feelings, but yeah, to be honest, I went in there and I didn't really have a clear speaking strategy. And I think that is something I have to really think about for next time, plan and do, because it's something I do really well when I do public speaking. And I love public speaking. It's my comfort zone. It doesn't matter how big the crowd is as well, which is cool. And I've got a speaking strategy that works, and it's a formula. Go in there and enjoy it, smash it, and leave. So I think I need to do something similar for interviews, because this is probably the first of quite a few that I'm going to have over the next year and a bit. I can see that happening because of certain things I'm doing in my personal life and work, etc. So it was a really good experience, because I think it's easy for poor people to hear this and think, oh man, I really had a crap time. But you know what? I actually had a really good time. And most importantly, people started responding to it, and they were actually like kind of surprised happily to actually see someone openly on there talking about the stigmas, but then living it as well on the podcast. Because it's all good, because you hear people struggling and then they overcome it, and then a few years later they start talking about it. But I was literally on there, like actually performing the struggle itself, which for some people it will help them understand it better, which is a benefit, I think, which is a positive that came out of it. So yeah, Chris, I can see you writing. Chris, have you got any more questions?
I just got one more question, because you say you didn't have a clear speaking strategy
Give me a
going.
second, Chris. Sorry, there's a bit of static every time you talk. Is
No,
that me or
sorry.
you? I want to check. Carry on again. Sorry.
Can you hear me now? How's
Yeah,
it now?
Go for it.
You said you didn't have a clear speaking strategy before you went into it. I understand it was quite early in the morning. You had to do this podcast.
That's irrelevant.
No. But
Yeah.
what I'm getting to is, do you think that, or was there no apprehension beforehand because it was like, right, I'm up, I'll finish this, and now I'm getting into the podcast, so I'll be fine. I've been doing podcasts every day. And then was it a case that you got onto the podcast and you were like, oh wait, like this is going out to the entire Tamil community? Did that happen as you started the podcast? Did that contribute anything?
I can't actually consciously remember that, to be honest, but I think maybe when it started and got the introduction going and stuff, and that's when it hit me. Because before I was on there, I had some stuff in the morning. Then I was on the reading club for like about 10 minutes, catching up with people on there. Then kicked off the seminar, the webinar at 8, jumped off around 8:15, did the podcast 8:25, came off. You know what? Like it was really interesting actually, because the mindset is so important. It's so important. If you want to really, like, speech-wise, smash it technically, there are so many different aspects that go into the mindset. Because we can talk about environment and stuff like that, but I literally switched from 2 completely different environments, but didn't adjust the mindset accordingly.
And were your intentions completely different in the first one to the second one?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. It's mad, isn't it?
It's crazy how stuttering works. You could have been on a call 20 minutes before.
Completely mad.
Everything you know, could have worked on your speech, could have advertised, you could have been completely chilled. And then literally you open up a new Zoom chat and it's like, whoa, what's happened here?
It's mental. You're still sitting in the same chair, still in the living room, still talking to computer screen.
And that for me just reinforces even more that it is heavily in the mind. It is heavily a psychological issue rather than a physical issue, because you experienced 2 very different things in the space of 10 minutes. It was like worlds apart. But I do think it is important to stress, we're talking like you wasn't able to get a word out. That was not the case. I've listened to the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just part of having a stutter. It's part of the journey. And it's just something that we have to acknowledge, analyze, and then try to build on. The good thing is that you haven't just ignored it. You're not just going to put it past you and carry on like nothing happened. It's like, okay, this happened. What am I going to do about it now?
Yeah, definitely. And everything's a learning opportunity, I think. I think you believe that as well.
Sure.
But it's only a learning opportunity if you learn from it. Because it's all good saying it. You just need to start applying it, right? Yeah, it was really interesting. But you could tell actually that I did enjoy the podcast and stuff, and had a good time on there chatting. And that's pretty much like me, isn't it? Because regardless of how it's going and stuff, I love communicating with people and sharing ideas and et cetera, et cetera. So regardless, I did achieve what I wanted to achieve, but I do always strive for more and look for improvement. And I will apply this going forward, Chris.
And also, anyone else may have come off of that. You had to do another podcast with us later on in the day. People would have been dwelling on the morning experience too much, and it would have played too much of a role in the rest of their day. And they wouldn't have been able to just plow on and carry on and keep going and keep looking for those speaking opportunities to improve and learn even more. And I think that's the most important thing here. It's you take action, you monitor the outcome afterwards, but you still carry on regardless of what the experience was like. People usually only like to keep momentum when things are going well. When things don't go too well, they like to stop and they tend to give up at the first hurdle, and they tend to lose belief in whatever it is they're working on. And I think that's important. That's key for people to learn from this situation that you've just been in.
Oh, definitely. And plus, like, I was just too excited from, because it was on Saturday, right? And we had episode 50. And I was just gassed for that, fully gassed. So nothing was going to burst that bubble. But I'm going to throw something back at you, Chris, now. So based on like this story, this example, say hypothetically, if you kind of found yourself in a similar situation, how would you approach it? And you could answer it both before and after.
Okay, can you just repeat the question? Because if I've experienced the same thing where I've had a speaking situation that hasn't gone as well as I'd hoped, what do you mean, how would I approach it beforehand? Or are you talking about how would I approach it in it?
Instead of, sorry, so I'm going to rephrase that. So how would you be approaching it during? And then what would your kind of approach be afterwards?
My approach during would just be to try to, as much as I can in that moment. It's very difficult once you're in the moment, but I would try to use a break when Priya was talking, or when the person I'm talking to was talking. I would try to be using that moment to regroup and reframe things, and to kind of calm myself down again, so that I can go on and try and mini analyze what is happening in the moment as best I can. I will then try to execute things in a lot more exaggerated way to try and get small wins within that. But it is very difficult when you're in the moment. It is very difficult. To be honest, what I probably would have done is I would have tried to do what I've just said, but I would have already accepted, okay, this isn't going to plan. Let's wait until after and let's try and analyze it afterwards. Because there's no point driving yourself mad in the moment in that conversation. But then afterwards, I would have taken a look at it. I would have been analyzing my hexagon, to be honest. And I would have been like, right, how did you enter that speaking situation? Because 9 times out of 10, the bad experiences I've had recently when there's been tension is because I'm going in there trying to be fluent from the off. And I get off to a terrible start, and then I struggle to recover. And once I struggle to recover, then it's just a complete shit show from there on. Excuse my French. But afterwards, I would be trying to seek that opportunity again. I would be trying to find as many speaking opportunities as I can. And I would be trying to get as many small wins talking to people outside of the stuttering community as I can. I think that would be very important to cancel out that situation as close to, because you can't ring Priya again and say, right, can we have another podcast so I can cancel that out? But you have to try and find another situation that means just as much to you, so that you can begin to rebuild your belief system. You have to respond straight away. You can't wait for a couple months. You can't let things dwell, because that compound effect, forget it. You can find yourself in a terrible place. So it would be about trying to do something straight away as soon as you can to get a small win under your belt.
Yeah, definitely, Chris. Thanks for the advice, actually. And it's something that I am working on, and I will be applying during this period. One thing that you did mention that I wanted to refer to was the hexagon and kind of belief system, and it's something that I probably didn't monitor on the actual day, because we actually did a hexagon episode recently. So it's actually good this happened, because then we can touch upon it. But if you look at my actions and the belief system I had around that with the podcast itself, I probably believe that kind of Tamil people, the older people who were listening on, they'll probably think, man, like, kind of like, what's wrong with this guy to do it? So then when I approached it, I wanted to come across as like fluent as possible or as fixed as possible. But because that's not how stuttering works, there was a class there. And because of the belief I had of that community, that would have increased the fear and then caused the blocks and freezes eventually. So yeah, it's just, the more you think about it, the more kind of you can detail and break it down and apply it to the hexagon. And that's something that we have like seen many times in John Harrison's book, where if you look under the bonnet, you can pinpoint areas that you have to address for these situations to actually tackle them successfully. And yes, because to your point on cancellation, it's vital. And I will be addressing it and doing a lot more stuff outside the stuttering community. Outside stuttering now, and maybe in the future redo the podcast and go on and do a part 2 or something, which will be quite cool.
What's interesting though is you mentioned there is how minute I wouldn't say issue, but how minute the factor was that caused that during that episode of the podcast. Like, for example, the other day, last Friday, I was on another Zoom call with Ruben, and it was with people from outside of the stuttering community. It wasn't even a Toastmasters community. It wasn't a working on your speech community at all. Something completely separate. And the person hosting asked for a volunteer to be the first to talk. Now, Ruben, you were the first one to volunteer. You were the first one to switch your mic on and get involved. So it's not your intentions, for me, from an outsider looking in, but looking closely, your intentions are pretty consistent. Your intentions are always to speak, to communicate. There is no room for avoidance for you. That is non-negotiable. So with this, it's just obviously, well, not obviously, but from what I'm seeing, it's just your previous experience with the Tamil community cropping up again. So everyone may have that area that they have to focus on and continue to try and work on and overkill it and get to the bottom of it. I'm sure I've got my areas, but they may not have cropped up. And this is why it also relates to how challenging is an individual's lifestyle. How often are they putting themselves in challenging situations? Because, for example, Ruben, if this podcast cropped up in 15 years' time, there's nothing to say that your reaction wouldn't have been the same if you'd not addressed it for 15 years. So this is why working on your speech is a very complex thing. And it takes years to overcome every area.
Yeah, definitely, Chris. Thank you very much. So I forgot volunteered first, actually. Just it was a reflex. But one thing that I do want to stress is for people looking on and listening to this and thinking, man, like these guys are really kind of self-critical and beating themselves up. No, like this is actually us talking about things to try and, I guess, provide insight to people who may be experiencing the same thing. And for me personally, this was a very, very specific situation, which is why I take some comfort in the fact that it isn't like something that can really crop up and affect me generally. But it's something that is very specific, so it means you can address it a bit more easier because it's easier to pinpoint and then cancel and redo, etc., etc. So good experience for everyone, I think. Everyone, especially some of the feedback I was getting from people saying, man, like that was really cool, really inspiring and stuff. So it was really good information sharing exercise for people, because you start talking about this kind of stuff, but in different forums, so reach new people. And that's the most important thing, to be honest, like for the general goals. But as we all know, we like to give value to people, but we also need to think about our own personal goals as well. And that's why I will be working bang on my speech and like stepping up, amping up, because that's what lockdown's about, isn't it? Trying to slowly upgrade yourself in different areas where you can.
Yeah, exactly that, man. Exactly that. Like I've got an experience from last week. I had to take my car for an MOT. The guy asked me my number plate, and I struggled to say it. Now, it's not a person that I know well. I've met him a couple of times, but he's my friend's older brother. So I've only met him a couple of times, just hi and bye type thing. And after that experience, I knew that I would be expecting a phone call from him on the result of the MOT. And I couldn't wait for him to call me. I couldn't wait for it because I just wanted an opportunity to cancel that out, because I jumped out of the car, I was in a rush, and I went for fluency, and it didn't go to plan. And then I had to really concentrate. I had to rein it in. I had to really focus on what I need to execute to continue the conversation in the best way possible for me in that moment. And it's frustrating when it happens, but I also appreciate when it happens, because it reminds me that we're always vulnerable and we always have to keep on top of these things. And it's not working on your speech is never a thing that you can get complacent with. You always have to be on top of it. And when you're not, we do get caught out, no matter how far along in the journey we are. And that's what lockdown has definitely taught me.
Yeah, definitely. I think we can apply principles that we learned yesterday from Tanvir, because don't focus, or if you just focus on kind of what you're doing, then at some point when it stops, do you have the system to carry that on? But focus on habits. So develop different habits that will actually lead you to your kind of objectives and stuff. And that's something that I have already been practicing, but something I'm going to be a bit more mindful of going forward. Because even small things like keeping your phone next to you, should you put it away for a few hours and get on with your work, or when you wake up, what's the first thing you do? Like different things. How are you starting your day? I saw this funny post from Joe Rogan today where he put up this video of from a slap tournament. So two people sitting opposite table to each other, and they were just slapping each other, and it's an actual tournament with fans and stuff. And he just said, "Look, man, I've been watching these videos all morning. I have to do some meditation or something because I don't want to start the rest of this day with that kind of energy in me. And that's the type of mentality you have to adopt at times to, I guess, take things to the next stage, like make some really big, consistent changes to progress. I can see a comment from Callum saying, I think that level of self-criticism is beneficial, as I always listen to my podcast back to look for ways to improve and move forward, especially when things don't go to plan. And I think that's brilliant. And Chris, like some of the first time when you were recording and doing stuff, how did it feel actually hearing your voice when you played it back?
I hated it. I absolutely hated it. I really had to get used to it. I had to get used to it for a long time. But then after a while, it's just, you don't even take no notice of it. You know what to expect. I think a level of self-criticism is great. I think it is good. I think it is beneficial to us and our continuous improvement. But to dwell on it is where it can be counterproductive. To dwell on it for too long and allow it to play too much, allow it to take up too much space in our brain can be counterproductive. We need to just understand what's happened, realize why it's happened, and then we need to rectify it quickly. And if we don't do it quickly, that's when it becomes a problem.
CJ, what's your most kind of basic advice for someone who hasn't embarked on the WOMS route yet, but wants to cancel out a situation?
Who hasn't embarked on the WOMS route yet, but wants to cancel out a situation? Well, it depends what the situation is, because like your one, you can't recreate it as quickly as other situations. But I would be just trying to get into it ASAP, as soon as you can. Just try to put yourself in that position again and again and again and again.
No other words needed, because it's pretty simple, isn't it, Chris? But it can be difficult to actually recreate. However, if it is bothering you, then you got to do something about it, because it will just make things worse, right?
You see, the problem for me is it's very difficult for me to advise someone who's not working on your speech, because what working on my speech instilled in me is that mindset of if I fear something, I have to do it now. That's what it instilled in me. It made me realize that if you're worried you're not going to be able to say a word, you have to go and say it now. I have to find out. I have to learn about my stutter now. I have to realize what I need to work on more. I have to realize where I've come, how far I've come, what situations I enjoy, which situations I don't enjoy. Those ones work on more. So it's very difficult for me to try and instill that in someone else without them going through the journey that I went through, because going through that journey and enjoying the journey as much as enjoying making a speech at the end of it, or what you think is the end of it at that time, I enjoy the journey as much as the speech, as much as the podcast episode, as much as whatever that milestone may be. I enjoy the process. So that's why it's hard for me to put myself in the shoes of someone not working on a speech, but trying to make improvements in other ways.
Oh yeah, completely, Chris. Completely. Like, if hypothetically I told you that I've got this computer kind of headset, a bit like the thing in the Matrix, and I can teach you 10 years worth of BJJ, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Then you put the headset on for 2 hours, 3 hours, learn everything, then you take it off, then I give you your black belt. How do you feel?
I'd feel like I cheated the system.
Proper, because you eventually got those goals and objectives, but you didn't have the journey, is it? The journey is what will make you grow in terms of your characteristics, your personality, grow as a person. So it isn't like the objective is the target, but the real benefit comes when you go through the journey.
Yeah, because you learn things. You learn, okay, so when I was working on this happened, but now I'm actually executing it. Something else has happened. How are you going to react to it now? You can't learn how to react to it if you haven't experienced it, because the real world is not as you expect. You can't plan it out. You can't stage the real world in any therapy room or any therapy environment. It's like if, you know, Cristiano Ronaldo can take penalties all day long, every day of the week in training. But when it's the World Cup final and you're standing there and it's 4-4 on penalties and you're taking the fifth penalty in front of the world, are you going to be able to keep your cool and execute what you've been practicing, or are you not? And you're only going to really know when you try in that real world situation. And if it doesn't go to plan, are you going to step up and take the penalty again? Or are you going to look to your teammate to take it for you? And I associate that with working on your speech. You can work on your speech. We can do all these Zoom calls every day, but when we go out in the real world, like, that is game day to me. And just because it doesn't go right and I miss and I block and I don't execute it as well as I should have or as well as I know I can do, that isn't going to stop me from doing it again.
That's 100% correct, Chris. And something else on the back of that I want to reiterate is people can look at this podcast and see, so these two guys are back again. They know it alls, but we don't know it all. Sometimes we can't apply it all either, and it isn't about kind of being 100% tomorrow or just being perfect or fluent for the rest of my life. This is all about the incremental journeys, the incremental improvements on the journey, and along the way giving value, improving yourself, and kind of growing together and stuff. And I'm kind of really pleased about the things that we have built here, Chris, especially recently in the last 2 months. I feel that SHB has a bit more of a footprint, a bit more, there's a lot more values providing to the community. And I've been getting a lot of engagement from people outside, friends and family, just really curious, want to help out, want to donate, want to do this, want to do that. And I think it's great because in times like this, you actually have opportunity to hone skills. I've seen friends and stuff like doing a lot of gardening, a lot of cooking, all that kind of stuff. And this has been kind of the main thing for me personally, just kind of working on the podcast, which has secondary kind of benefits to speaking as well, and B, like growing the reach, and the services of the charity. So it's been really, really cool. We can't take our eyes off the goal, which is growing the charity to something really special. But at the same time, we have to still take care of ourselves. And I think that's a key thing that I have to remember at times. I think AO definitely has to remember, because he puts a lot of things ahead of himself. And I've got to do the same thing. So it's been a good learning experience recently, Chris. Have you had any epiphanies recently yourself?
Epiphanies. I just think I've realized what's important to me, what my true values are, and that, yeah, I do focus too heavily on work. I do focus on wanting to help people all the time, but there's times where you have to work on yourself. You have to work on things like your relationship with your girlfriend or your wife. These things also need work. So we have to find that perfect balance, really. We can't just be obsessed with working on our speech all the time. We can't just be obsessed with coaching people all the time. We can't just be obsessed with work all the time. We have to find that balance. And when there's balance with everything else, there's usually a balance in our head, and we have a lot clearer mind to execute things like working on our speech. So for me, it's just about realizing what's important, focusing on them all, and giving them all an equal amount of my attention.
Definitely, Chris. And one of the things I've been focusing on actually is Ozark. Have you seen that yet?
I haven't. Charlie watched the whole series without me.
Really?
Yeah, the whole series. Charlie loved it though. She said it's amazing.
Yeah.
Potentially better than Breaking Bad.
Oh, really? So tell her we are on season 2 right now, but it has a similar pace where I really enjoyed season 2 of Breaking Bad, actually.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to this because Breaking Bad was really, really good, but season 4 and 5 was just a bit too much, kind of
dragging on a little bit.
It wasn't dragging on, actually. I think it was quite full on, but I prefer like a slow burner where they slowly reveal the plot as opposed to it's like mad stuff. But I guess it's hard to compare seasons. I've realized with Power that you can't take anything for granted. Because those last 2 seasons were, oh my God, they were terrible. But hey ho, if you end up starting Power, I suggest you stop at the end of season 4. Start something else.
Yeah, just accept at the end of season 4, that's it, it's finished. Not worth watching the end.
Pretty much, Chris, pretty much. However, you were the one who told me that it gets better towards the end of season 6.
Well,
I trusted you, Chris.
It improves at the end of season 6 for sure.
It couldn't get any worse, man. Couldn't get any worse. There was
I thought it was all right, man.
There were some stupid episodes. The kidnapping hoax with Tariq was a complete waste of time. What were they doing? They kept getting money, then getting robbed, then kept losing it, and getting it back in the same episode. It was chaos. And the other one was when they kidnapped the cartel lady from the courthouse.
Yeah.
So many plot conveniences there. And then that guy, he ended up killing her anyway at the end of the episode for no reason.
Without making it a complete spoiler, I think what happened is that they obviously wrote the series but hadn't decided who was the killer. And then they had to work it out towards the end. And then they had to rush the filming of it, which is clear in the production and the delivery of it. So, yeah. All right, Ruben, I give it to you. Perhaps it weren't that great.
Lazy scripting, I'd say. If you compare it to season 1, it's like 2 different shows. That's what's so sad. It just, the drop was massive. Massive.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Who's your favorite character, by the way? Just out of interest before we move on.
In Power?
Yeah.
Tommy, 100%.
Tommy's wicked.
Tommy's just mad. He's just crazy, man.
But I think there were a few other actors actually I thought were wicked as well. Tasha.
Oh yeah, Tasha, yeah.
Tasha was hilarious. So funny.
Dre's quite good as well.
Yeah.
I like Dre. His character was quite good. And when I saw after what he does, I couldn't believe it. I thought his acting was so good. And then I was on YouTube just scrolling and I saw some guy singing like these love songs and these dance songs. And I was like, oh my God, that's Dre from Power. But apparently he was a singer long before Power.
Yeah. So the episode at the end when the one about him where they were trying to work out if he was the killer.
Yeah.
Then he dies at the end.
Yeah.
In the closing credits in that last scene, they play his song.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I thought that was quite cool.
I didn't
Wrote to
watch the
me.
credits. I just skipped it straight away onto the next episode.
I don't mean like the full credits, but you know when it leads on to the credits, they start.
Oh, right. Okay, no.
Yeah. So in the bit
I
when he's
didn't
like burning
even
down.
I
Yeah.
didn't even realize because I didn't even know he was a singer.
Yeah. So is that kind of when um the episode is about to close, they put music on and they have a few scenes.
Yeah.
They put his song on. I forgot which one it was, but you can see on the subtitles. We have it on, and then you can see his name appear.
Okay.
I was like, oh, that's his tune. It's very nice of them, isn't it?
Have you heard the story about 50 Cent changing the theme tune after, I think it was season 3?
Well, what happened?
So he he had the theme tune, the original one that everyone that's used, and then he got Trey Songs to record a new theme tune, and they put that theme tune on at the beginning of the new season. I think it was season 3 or season 4. I can't remember. And everyone was like, "This is terrible." Like they were going mad. How can you change the theme song? And then he had to change it back to the original one, which was sung by Joe and him. And even Trey Songz rang 50 Cent. It was like, "I told you shouldn't have changed it, man. I told you. Look what happened. Look what happened." Everyone hates it. So yeah, he had to listen to the viewers and change it back.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, everyone was like, "You're crazy. How can you change the theme tune?" It became iconic, and he just decided to change it.
That's something else, actually. I didn't think he was the best actor, but Kanan wasn't a bad character, actually.
No, his character was really good, and I think that when he leaves, I think that's the beginning of the downfall. I think.
Just a quick
Yeah.
one
So,
about Tommy. So he actually appears in Ozark as well, apparently.
oh,
The
I don't
actor.
know. I haven't seen
Yeah,
it.
no, it's true. It's true.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
because that was one of the hooks that we had. So we had a choice between starting Ozark or Money Heist. Now
Okay.
we watched
Money
the first,
Heist.
yeah, we watched the first episode of both, and then I just said, look, if Tommy's in Ozark, then we're gonna watch
I'm
Ozark.
watching it. Money Heist. You have to read subtitles the whole way, right? Or
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, but that's cool because we are okay with that. We watched Kingdom before that, which is all in Japanese. No, so it's all in Korean, and that was
Okay.
wicked. That was wicked.
Do you have to read the subtitles, or is it dubbed?
Subbed.
Oh, sub, whatever it's called. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to read it because they speak in
Oh,
Korean.
that. Oh, forget it.
This is wicked.
I can't. I can't be sitting there reading subtitles for hours and hours on end. I
It's
can't be
better
doing
than
that.
Power season 6, put it that way.
I don't know. I can't do it. Can't do it.
CJ,
Yeah, man.
any final words on Power before we close this episode?
Yeah, I think we've talked everyone out of watching it
Dude,
if they were thinking about it.
wonder who's left actually watching. Okay, they probably thought, oh, these guys have stopped talking about speech. I'm off. Yeah, but go on.
Probably.
This episode, ups and downs, my experience, my analysis, your experience the other day, your analysis, and what's your take-home points for today?
That yes, we do coach people. Yes, we have got good control of our speech the majority of the time, but we do not know everything. And I think no one who's working on their speech knows everything. We have our ups and we have our downs, but we show up every day regardless. And that's the key thing here.
Yeah, I think that's the strongest thing you could say. Actually, we always turn up, and if you're always turning up, then you always got a chance. And to be honest, what's the worst that can happen? Oh yes, Callum's still here. Come on, Callum. Yes, of course.
Callum never lets us down.
Yes, man like Callum. But on a serious note, stuttering it does affect a lot of people. people's mental health, especially now being kind of isolated. If you live by yourself and stuff, it isn't the best. I'm pretty lucky here. I got my wife. So I'm pretty sane. Also got Chris on Zoom every day, which is quite cool. And just keep practicing, keep working, keep looking forward, keep being positive. And plus, this gives you a project to do, something to work on, your speech or the charity or coaching. There's so much out there that you can do with stuttering. If you open your mind and allow yourself to actually grow. But on that note, I think we are at a good point to actually close out episode 53, Chris. 53. Yep. These numbers are a bit weird now, aren't they? I think it doesn't have the same ring as 50 for some reason.
Yeah, but we're getting into crazy territory now, Ruben.
And I
There's
think
not many people that get to episode 53 of their podcast.
Not really, no. But I used to get really amped about approaching like a 20 or a 30 or 40. But I'm not sure if you can top 50 until you get to 100 or something.
No, we're just going to have to keep going until we get to 100.
Dude, shall we double down and do like 2 per day?
And
smash this in a month? No, let's not do that. That'd be hilarious.
That'd be crazy.
So Chris, how was your afternoon?
Yeah. Has anything changed since I spoke to you about 2 hours ago?
Nah. Dude, imagine if we do like a 7 a.m. podcast.
Oh, God, I'd be half asleep.
That'd be hilarious. And if Callum's kind of asleep as well, then it'll be a bit pointless as well.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you very much, Chris, as always. My name is Ruben Pillai. I'm with CJ, aka Christopher Jackson, and this is episode 53. And I'll keep quiet to let Chris do the formalities.
Thank you, Ruben, for another episode. I'm Christopher Jackson. This has been episode 53 of the SHB Unfiltered podcast. Ups and downs. Regardless, we still show up every day. Remember, stop holding back.